Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Cutting Edge Figure Skating Podcast. My name is Kim Dunaway, and in this episode, I will be counting down my 10 top moments in figure skating in 2024. Happy New Year, everybody. It's now officially 2025, and I'm going to take this one brief look back on last year and talk about some of the top moments, not the best moments, because not every moment is positive. But as always, this is my third year doing this particular podcast. I'm always going to end on a high note. So number 10 is the Japanese women. This fall, they got 13 of the 18 medals available in the Grand Prix. And they actually bested what we have seen from Russia in the last Olympic cycle. So in the 2019-2020 season, Team Russia for the ladies got 12 of the 18 medals available, and they also did that again in the 2021-22 season leading up into the Olympics. But here, the Japanese women actually bested that by one, getting 13 out of the 18 medals available. The 5 that they didn't get went 1 bronze to Cheyenne Kim, 1 bronze to Isabel Levito, 1 bronze to Lorinaki Gutmann, and then 2 golds to Amber Glenn. And of course, they qualified 5 women also for the Grand Prix final, matching what Russia did back in the 21-22 season also. So just extremely impressive. We just came out of their nationals where they had so many amazing women. In fact, one of the women that qualified for Grand Prix final finished like 12th at Japanese nationals, which is not uncommon because it is so incredibly competitive, and there's a lot of really fantastic women on the junior circuit as well. I do remember Mark Hanreddy saying during the Junior Grand Prix that there was an event in the summer that had I think it was 100 junior women that had entered. Just insane, the amount of talent that is coming out of Japan right now. And that is my number 10 moment of the season. My number 9 moment is the return of Alysa Liu. It was a surprise to some, maybe not a surprise to others, when Alysa decided to retire after the 2022 season. She was just 16 at the time, had won 2 national titles at 12 and 13, and had, like so many women, puberty, you grow, you have to relearn how to jump, and had challenging seasons sort of leading up to the Olympics, but had really a very good season that year. Finished in the top 6 at the Olympics, got a bronze medal at Worlds, and then retired. And it didn't seem like we were ever going to see Alysa again. And lo and behold, we got a cryptic, I think it was Instagram message from her earlier this year. I believe it was early February, perhaps, that she was back on the ice. And sure enough, she made a return. And we saw her in 2 Grand Prix this fall, as well as a challenger. And she's looked pretty good. She's definitely, in my opinion, not a lock by any stretch of the imagination, but definitely one of the favorites to get one of the world spots this year at Boston Worlds. And she's been just a really great story to see her come back with more of a love for skating than what she had before. She definitely had a lot of joy and youthful exuberance when she first burst onto the scene. Then there were multiple coaching changes. There seemed to be a lot of interference from her dad, and just didn't seem to have that same joy when she left the skating world 2.5 years ago. But it's so nice to see her back. And that is the number 9 moment of the year for me. Number 8, I have Amber Glenn, and just the tale of 2 very different seasons. If you think about the way she started the season, the year, in 2024, she won nationals. Her first national title was a big deal. Wasn't the way that she would have wanted to win. She didn't have her best skate in the free skate there, and neither did Isabeau, so she was able to come out on top. She followed that up with not a great outing at Worlds. She ended up 10th there. Lucky for her, Isabeau ended up 2nd, so he still qualified 3 spots for this year's Worlds. But it just seemed like it was never going to quite happen for Amber. It was always going to be just almost there. There's always going to be a mistake somewhere. And in this fall, Amber is like a brand new skater. She won everything she entered this fall. She won at LaGuardia, Then she won both of her Grand Prix and then got the biggest win of her career, Grand Prix final, and goes into nationals as the favorite and returning champion. And everything has just gone so incredibly well for her in the fall. And it's been so nice to see finally, and I think it's inspiring for a lot of skaters that have struggled in the past to see the likes of someone like Amber. Deanna, you could also throw into that boat as well, for the perseverance and the resilience that they have showed to continue to improve themselves, do what they needed to do mentally, emotionally, physically, to be at the peak of what we are seeing from Amber right now is just really phenomenal. And it was hard to see that 6 months ago. And here we are, and she's number 8 on my countdown. All right, I have number 7. I have the return of Daniel Grassl, because when he made the switch to go to Atari in the 2022-23 season, it was very puzzling. And the next thing we knew coming into the following season is that he had to withdraw from all of his events because he had missed several drug tests. We never got any resolution at the time as to exactly what happened. Did he miss the test on purpose? Was he on some kind of drugs? What exactly has transpired? And frankly, it wasn't until his second Grand Prix that there was an interview that came out where he got to explain, basically, he explained it as a mix-up. I went into great detail about that in the interview in the second Grand Prix that he was in that recap episode. But he was suspended for a year, could not skate at all, basically. And he is back. I think he is appreciating skating to a higher degree now, with it having been taken away from him. I know a lot of people still have very mixed feelings about seeing Daniel skate, but it was certainly a big deal when the Grand Prix assignments came out and he was on there, and it was kind of like, oh, so he's back? What on earth? It was very odd. So I have that as number 7, the return of Daniel Grassl. And, he certainly had a very triumphant return. 2 medals in the Grand Prix, got a berth in Grand Prix final. He goes into Europeans, definitely as a medal favorite. And so it's been a very good comeback and return for him, regardless of how you feel about him. All right, number 6 is Russia basically coming back in some capacity. This is more of a developing story for 2025. And frankly, it sort of didn't have a lot of firepower because there's still a lot of question marks, right? Russia has not competed internationally since the Olympics. After they made the decision as a country to invade Ukraine, then the ISU evoked a rule where they could ban them from competition. And of course, this came on the backs of the, crazy drama that ensued at the 2022 Olympics with Kamila Valieva. So I don't think anybody was really shedding a tear. I'm sure there was a few, but I think most of us were not really shedding a tear to see Russia banned, albeit temporarily. We all knew that they would be coming back at some point. And frankly, I thought we would see them before now. I really applaud the ISU for sticking to their guns as much as they have, because I think a lot of us expected for that ban to last a year and we would see them in the 2023-24 season, and that did not happen. But it has now been announced that they will be allowed to come back in a capacity where they're not going to be in the team events. They're not allowed to be as part of a team. They'll only be able to have one entry into each discipline because they're not going to be at Worlds to be able to qualify at multiple spots. And so they'll have to qualify spots at Nebelhorn. Well, actually, it won't be at Nebelhorn because I think they decided it was going to be in China instead. Yes, it will be in Beijing, China in September. The 17th through the 21st will be the qualifying competition for the Olympics. The plan is that they're supposed to only allow Russian athletes who have not been in support of the war, which I think a lot of us have concerns about. What is the criteria for that? How are they going to enforce that? I don't know. It's it's interesting because there obviously are a lot of athletes who were pictured at various rallies, especially in that first year. So I'm not exactly sure what athletes would qualify. Are Boykova and Kozlowski or Bishina and Galyumov, who would be competing for the one pair spot? You know, are both of those teams going to be eligible? I don't know. Stepanova and Bukin are the top Russian ice dance team by a mile. Are they allowed to compete or not? I don't know. So there's still a lot of questions. That's why I say it's a developing story. And it's been sort of a quiet bit of a story when it has been announced, but it's a big deal. Them coming back in whatever capacity is a big deal. And so for me, that is just outside of the top 5 at number 6. My number 5 moment is Gracie Gold's book coming out in February. I mentioned on my last podcast, Japanese Nationals, that I read 51 books this year. Gracie's was one of them, one of 2 skating books that I read, and it was one of the few books that I gave 5 stars to this year. It was absolutely phenomenal. I really enjoyed the rawness and the vulnerability that she brought to her story. The chapter about John Coughlin was extremely surprising and shocking. And of course, the chapter with her rape was also very difficult to read. And at the time when that book was published, had still not received any resolution to the complaint that had been placed several years prior with SafeSport. And so I really, really enjoyed that book. I highly recommend that you read it if you hadn't. I did do a special podcast back in February or March on that book specifically. It's about an hour long, had a lot of thoughts about it. And we don't get a lot of skating biographies. I know Adam Rippon had one after the Olympics, Nathan Chen, but we just don't have a lot. And so when we get one, you want to consume it. And especially one of this high quality, I think is really pretty rare. And of course, not a lot of skaters have the same type of up and down story that Gracie has either, which makes it very compelling. And I actually gave the book to my sister to read as well. She's someone who's suffered with depression, and she really enjoyed it as well, took a lot of notes on it. So I think it's one that's really relatable to people, whether they're a skating fan or not. In 4th, I have Shoma Uno retiring. And it was rumored during the fall that this was going to be his last season. It was never confirmed by Shoma, but shortly after Worlds, he did in fact retire from the sport, and he retires with just a huge trophy case full of medals, world titles, 2 Olympic medals in singles, and also a team Olympic medal as well. I didn't really ever get a chance to give Shoma his flowers, so let's just talk about him a little bit here and all the things that he accomplished. He ended up retiring at the age of 26 with a silver and a bronze from the Olympics in singles, and then also a silver in the team event. He won 2 world championships in 2022 and 2023. He won 2 silver medals at Worlds also. He has 3 medals from 4 continents, a gold, a silver, and bronze. He has a Grand Prix final title, as well as 3 silvers at Grand Prix final and 2 bronze. He won 6 national titles and 4 silvers, 10 medals at Japanese Nationals is just absolutely amazing. He also won a junior Grand Prix final and a junior world championships as well. Just an incredible career. He had the entire arsenal of quads that we saw him do. But what really I'm going to remember him for is just his incredible artistry that he brought. I love all of the different styles that we saw from him. We saw, the electronic bolero, right? We saw like the Native American music that he used one year, many, many times where he used more classical pieces. We saw him do Nessun Dorma, just a lot of different pieces. In fact, I haven't done a male skater for one of my career retrospectives. Like I've thought about doing Yuzuru Hanyu, but Shoma might be a good one to do as well. I'm going to put a pin in that and think about, maybe doing one on Shoma in the summer. If not this summer, then in a future season for sure. All right, moving on to my top 3 moments of the year. So number 3, I have just Worlds in general. In fact, these next three all have like multiple things going on in each of these moments. So at Worlds, for me, really it was three moments that just really stood out. One is Elia, not because he won Worlds. Many American men have won Worlds. It was the performance that he put on in that free skate that was just a stunner. It's something that I'm always going to remember. And we're just sitting on my couch watching it and just being like, okay, he is really doing this. Just quad after quad, crazy combination, getting the highest technical score that we have seen anybody ever do was just incredible. And it was a huge moment. The crowd was on their feet, loud, super loud, just a really amazing moment. And in that same competition, we had Adam Seohimfa make that incredible leap from 19th after the short program. 19th means you are in the first group going. So even a bigger jump than what we saw Nathan Chen make at the Olympics in 2018. He wasn't able to get himself onto the podium, but he got himself into the top 5 after being in the teens. But this kind of jump was just really unheard of. And for a while, it was like, is he gonna not just medal? Is he gonna win? Are we gonna have, or Yuma and Elia gonna implode like we've seen so many other men implode before them? But no, but still, to make it onto the podium in third place after starting out in 19th, getting ahead of Shoma, who didn't have his best skate, unfortunately, for him, was really amazing. It was very exciting to watch as he just continues to sit there, in the little chairs as they wait and be like, okay, is this skater going to beat him? Nope. Is this skater going to do it? Nope. Incredible. Just incredible. I don't even know sometimes how I even feel about it, because as a skating fan who grew up in the 90s watching the 6.0, you would never see that kind of a jump. It was just absolutely impossible with the ordinals to see that kind of a jump. I mean, one of the most memorable jumps I can think of was like Nicole Boback at the 1997 US Nationals. She went from 6th to 3rd. Like, that was considered a big jump. So when you think about, 19th to 3rd, like, that just blows your mind. It's insane. It's crazy. And then the other moment that really stood out at Worlds was Deanna and Max winning Worlds. And again, we've seen Canadian pair teams win Worlds before. I mean, Megan Duhamel and Eric Radford won 2 world titles less than 10 years ago. It's not that. It is kind of like I talked about with Amber Glenn earlier, the resilience that we have seen out of Deanna Stellato Dudek. Someone who has over 40 years old skating at this high a level is just incredible. I remember there was just a couple of seasons ago, maybe even last season, it's a pair skater, her name escapes me, skating for Great Britain, and she was in like I think she was like 40 and still hanging on because there wasn't another good pair team really until we had Faye Penlaw and Luke Digby's kind of come on these last couple of seasons. And so she was still skating at a very high level at like 40. And I just remember thinking, wow, she's the same age as me. I cannot imagine. But with Deanna, who was somebody kind of like Amber, had a lot of success at the junior level and just never really happened for her at seniors. She went to pairs, never really happened with pairs. And then she sort of resurfaces with Max Deschamps, and it's just like the planets aligned. And even in that first season after the Olympics, when Alexa and Brandon and Mira and Kihara were competing for the top pair team, and Deanna and Max were doing well, just, to sort of get on the podium, just sort of be in the conversation, I could not have foreseen the jump that they made from that season to last season. It was just incredible. The work that they have put in is incredible. And that moment winning Worlds in Canada, the country that she represents and is now a citizen of, it was just really super special. And so for me, just the Worlds in general was just such a moment. In fact, I thought it might be number 1 when I really think about all of the emotions that it kind of evoked. But ultimately, there were just 2 stories that are just bigger than even Worlds was. So number 2 is one of the Debbie Downers of the countdown. And that is all of the sex scandals that we had in 2024. In fact, when I started to compile my list a couple of months ago, I had a lot of these scandals just individually. And I thought, as I was compiling this list, making my final decisions just a couple of days ago, I was like, there is no way that I can have a top 10 list and have like 4 or 5 places all be some kind of sex scandal. Like, that's just such a bummer. So I'm just going to put them all together in one, because it's just kind of sad, frustrating on so many different levels. But at least in a lot of these different scandals, there has been justice. So obviously it started off with, in January, with Christine Brennan breaking the news about Nikolai Sorensen. And boy, talk about just fall from grace. I mean, here is a team that just has kind of historically been the people's champion, the underdogs. People are always rooting for this team. Not that people haven't given Nikolai the blues over time, because they never felt like he was skating to the level of Laurice Fournier-Beaudry. But when that report came out, it was shocking and sad. There were very graphic details within the report. And then to have swift justice, which basically never happens in this sport. As I mentioned earlier with Gracie Gold, it was like 7 years. And I don't know that her particular case would have been decided if she hadn't had the publicity from her book, honestly, that sort of spurred that. But in this case here, between this story getting broken in January, and then by the time that the Grand Prix season started, he was banned. We just haven't really seen that. Now, part of that was it wasn't Safe Sport that made that decision. It was the Canadian version of Safe Sport that made that decision that he was banned. But obviously it was really, really weird, because they did withdraw from nationals because of all of the reports and requests for interviews, but then they showed up at 4 continents, basically refusing to answer any questions. They went to Worlds, and I was shocked, really, that the Canadian fans were so kind to them. And I was like, do they just not know what's going on? Which is quite the possibility. It was just kind of weird, but he has now been banned, and Laurice Fournier-Beaudry, we've not heard a peep really out of her, and obviously at this point in her career, probably not going to try to get another partner. The other one that was really big was the one I had mentioned before. So it later came out that it was Brandon Carey, the Australian male figure skater who is now retired but was coaching, was the person who, I have to use the word allegedly because it's not been proven in a court of law, raped Gracie Gold. And there was another complainant as well that had a similar issue with him. So he was banned, and he's no longer allowed to coach. I believe in the US, Safe Sport doesn't have jurisdiction over other countries. Could he coach in the Philippines? I mean, probably, if he wanted to. So in Carey's situation, the second complainant was a minor, and he did admit to having a relationship, but stated he was unaware of her age. Okay. Australia is currently investigating the allegations as well. His mother, who was in some type of a position, I think she was the president. Yes, she was the president of the Australian Professional Skaters Association. She stepped down because of the investigation. And so he has stopped coaching, but he is appealing. And that's sort of where that particular case is. Then we had the whole issue with Team Korea with Hyein Lee and Young Yu. Hyein Lee had an inappropriate relationship with a minor skater, and then Young Yu apparently took some pictures or distributed some pictures of this young skater that were inappropriate, and so both of those ladies were suspended. Now, Hyein Lee ended up appealing her suspension, and she has been reinstated. So she was at the Korean ranking competition, and she's actually on her way to 4 continents and worlds. Interestingly enough, Young Yu did not appeal, and so she's still serving in a suspension. And then we had the whole drama with Ivan Desiatov. And that all broke just a couple of days before Skate America. The actual sanctions was broken by Phil Hirsch right in the middle of Skate America. The whole thing was just crazy. And the only thing that would have been crazier would have been for those things to have come out a couple of days later, and for those two to have actually been at the event. That would have been just a nightmare for U.S. figure skating. So obviously they got a handle on that news before all of that went down. There's also graphic details about that particular encounter and the victim there, if you want to read on that. At this point, I'm so done with all of these scandals. And I hope that as these things come to light, that people who might ordinarily engage in some of these kind of activities, drink one too many alcohols where they don't make good decisions. Like, I hope that it will cause people to take pause, if that's the only good thing that can come out of some of these types of things. And so it's unfortunate, but the whole year was just peppered with these types of controversies. And so there's no way that it couldn't end up on the countdown. There's also no way that I was going to let it be number one. So we are to my number one moment of 2024. And again, this one is a complex one as well. It is ultimately the cast decision that came finally over 2 years after the Olympics, suspending Kamila Valieva and awarding the gold medal in the team event to the U.S. team, awarding the silver medal to the Japanese team, and then making the decision to award the bronze to the Russian team, which was surprising to a lot of people because most people expected that once Valieva was disqualified, her results were disqualified, that they would reorder the skaters, which would push Canada up to 3 and push Russia to 4. However, they did not do that. They did not reorder the skaters. They simply just deleted Valieva's result, which still allowed Russia to get the bronze medal. So then at that point, Canada decided to appeal, and that still has not been resolved at this point. It's interesting, and I said it before at the time, that Canada was very, very quiet throughout this whole thing. They just kind of let USA just kind of lead the banging of the drums on this whole thing. Japan, a little bit. Some of the Japanese skaters, a little bit. But it was definitely mostly the U.S. skaters and U.S. figure skating, Christine Brennan, that were really banging the drum for something to happen. I said many times that I was so disappointed in the media here in the United States, like really outside of NBC, who, obviously has an invested interest in skating because they carry all the Olympics. They also have Peacock, which is an NBC Universal platform where they have all the skating, but no one else heard a peep out of the fact that there were a whole team of skaters who had not been awarded medals for 2 years. I just thought that was just ridiculous. There's so much crap in the news and they couldn't find, 5 seconds to mention the skaters, but whatever. Ultimately, they were awarded the gold medal, and at the Paris Olympics, the Japanese team and the U.S. team were awarded their medals finally. And they did get their big to-do. They didn't just get their medals in a box sent to their house. They did get a big ceremony at Paris, and they all seemed very happy and excited to finally get those medals. And I was glad that for the most part, it's been resolved. And obviously, we'll see what happens with Canada and Russia. I don't know that the ISU will be having a party for Canada if they get medals. I imagine that would be up to Team Canada to do something at that point. I definitely don't think they'll throw a party if ultimately they uphold Russia, which honestly is kind of what I feel like is going to happen, even though I do believe that I saw several things at that time where it said specifically in the rule book that in the event of a disqualification that they would be reordered. And frankly, I thought that would be resolved at this point already. I don't know what the issue is. But that is the number one moment of the year, that finally getting resolved, because they had both been on the countdowns in both years before, the fact that it had been unresolved. All right, so that completes my top 10 moments of 2024. We shall see what 2025 brings. Thank you guys so much for listening to the podcast. You can find me on all the socials at Ice Skate Podcast. And we're getting into a pretty busy season. Just in a couple weeks, it'll be time for Canadian Nationals as well as a preview for U.S. Nationals. So look for that in your podcast feed in the next couple of weeks. The good thing about Canadian Nationals is it is usually free. You can stream it on the website, and it's usually pretty easy to get replays of that as well on Daily Motion. So I'll try my best to post some links for that on my socials. And you can also use like, so you want to watch figure skating, you can follow them on socials, and they also will post a lot of those things as well. All right, you guys, I hope you had a fantastic new year, and I'll be back in your podcatcher real soon.